Hello, Kenny.
Rabbi Yisroel, welcome. Great to see you. Who's that guy in the other frame there? Special guest, Kevin Danna, Binah Winery. Very
Wow.
excited to have you on. And my first question: Are you having second thoughts about joining us today?
Oh, it was a few minutes ago, but I'm totally ready now.
Well, that's the glass of wine in your hand.
Happy hour.
So, a quick introduction: Kevin Danna of Binah Winery in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I've talked about his wines, I think, since the beginning. Been on that what's it bandwagon, I guess, but it's not really a bandwagon. But I've been on there since the beginning. Love it, promote it, happy to, and we're very happy that you joined us today. What's in your glass?
So I'm actually drinking Cabernet Franc Reserve, which hasn't been released yet. There's only 20 cases made. There was one barrel. And I decided to open it the other day and see how it's going. But I was planning to do about 6 months in the bottle aging before I release. Actually, I'll make the point that I think that you kind of discovered Binah Winery on Instagram. By the way, you've gone way back. I think you discovered me cutting the grass in the vineyard back in 2019, 5 years ago.
I think that's true. And I mean, my
Something like this, and you were, I think you said, wait, what is this?
right, right. And I mean, my Binah story is that, and Kevin and I have gotten to know each other since that time, and I've hosted Kevin in Baltimore for a great dinner, and those who were there were lucky, because those don't come around that often. He's hard to get. But my Binah story is my son's bar mitzvah was May 2020. Something else was going on in the world at that time, some pandemic thing. So we did a outdoor bar mitzvah, and we had the tent set up, that whole thing. And I really thought that I was going to have that first major like super spreader event or whatever like that, this was going to be the ground zero of like the mid-Atlantic or something. But in any case, what wines did I order? It was a boiling hot day, schmoiling, as we say in my house. That's extra hot. And I ordered Rosé and the Stella. That first one you made, right? The 2020 vintage, was that what it was? Or 2019 vintage? 2018.
Yeah, 2019 that would have been.
And it was such a hit, and there were so many people here, and it was such a hit. And I was like, from that point on, like but that was my story. And that's like, I don't know if I came to that first or I knew about you. I don't remember that part exactly, but that was such a big hit. Like it was really.
Oh yeah, I can't believe the Stella has been incredibly popular. So the 2019 wine. So the first year when I got started, I leased that vineyard in Easton, Pennsylvania. It was a 5-acre vineyard on somebody's kind of like private estate. They had grown grapes there for a few decades, and the person who had it got older and couldn't do it anymore, and they were looking for someone to come in. And I knew about it because I had bought grapes there, when I was a home winemaker. The opportunity came up, and I was ready to start the winery, and I went out there, and I had worked in the vineyard a little bit at the winery I had previously worked at, Pinnacle Ridge Winery in Kutztown here. But that was my first, farming experience, like totally diving in, trial by fire, very intense, very stressful. But it worked, and the Stella came about. It was kind of, I guess you could say, like a field blend, because there were so many different varieties in there. It's like, what do I do with these different varieties? And put them together, and Stella came out. That wonderful dry wine, hybrid grapes. So I guess and a lot of things, like the whole story of Binah and just the way this has all come about. It's all, here it is, all before you, the pieces, and like kind of throw it together and see what comes out, and like these amazing things keep coming out of it. So I don't know, it's been one small miracle after another. Hashem, I don't know. It's when you look back at the story the past 5 years, because I sold my first bottle in March of 2020, like a week after the pandemic hit, and none of that was in the business plan at all. So
You sold your first bottle in March of 2020?
Oh yeah.
I'm looking at a tasting note of mine at Binah, and I think that's what I ordered it based on. It was on April 5th, 2020. So I really probably wasn't the first
The first batch of customers.
batch. Yeah. And I see a very
Instagram.
glowing note I wrote.
Yeah.
I'm reading it actually on Cellar Tracker.
Yeah. So 2019, I had the vineyard in Easton. I went out in February. I basically quit my job at Pinnacle Ridge. I was the assistant winemaker there for a few years before I went off and started Binah Winery, which had been in the works for years, but was only on paper until that point. And I went out on a snow-covered vineyard in February of 2019 and started pruning. Took care of the vineyard that year. We harvested with friends in the community here, and then moved the winery over to Allentown proper, which is about a half an hour distance, about 15 miles, and put the bulk wines in tank on a Penske truck and drove them over and to the new location here. And then, we're starting to bottle was in a rush. Let's get this stuff out. And then like the whole world just started melting down. It was crazy.
What a crazy time to open a business.
I mean, I thought, oh, this is not good. But, having survived that, it's a piece of cake from here.
So Pinnacle Ridge is, when did you start there? Did you say?
Pinnacle Ridge, I started, I think it was summer of 2016. So I started making wine at home in 2014 in my basement, just getting grapes from a local homebrew store here in Bethlehem. They would get the grapes in from California bulk, and in the spring they would get them from South America. Home winemakers could go and buy the grapes, and you'd take them home and crush them up. So I started doing that in 2014, but got pretty serious with the idea that we were going to start a kosher winery here in Allentown. And I think it was about 2014, 2015, I enrolled in a 2-year program, which at the time was run through Harrisburg area community college. I know you have ties to Harrisburg.
I do. My wife is from Harrisburg, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was a 2-year program. I think the program is now at Penn State Berks. They've moved it, but it's one of these 2-year programs. There's other ones. I think Vesta is another one that does like 3-year program. It's kind of like because you could like do the UC Davis thing and get on the waiting list for that and get like a real winemaking degree, or you can do this. It's for people who maybe own a vineyard or own property or had previous careers like I did and wanted to transition into winemaking. Do it's mostly online coursework and stuff like that. But then part of it, you had to do an internship. So that's how I got hooked up with Pinnacle Ridge Winery, because I basically sent an email out to all the local wineries and said, hey, I got to do this internship. Can you take me on? And Brad Knapp, who's the winemaker at Pinnacle Ridge, I think saw my resume and saw that I had an engineering background and thought, I got to scoop this guy up. So that's how I got started there as an intern. And then I just stayed and worked my way up, from cellar rat up to assistant winemaker, and was there for a few years until I went off and started being a winery.
So I mean, let me ask you this. I think common perhaps for Israeli winemakers, French winemakers, but American kosher winemakers don't typically get their start in a non-kosher place. How do you think that a lot of them obviously go through the Herzog machine? How do you think was that beneficial for you, and why?
Oh, for sure. I mean, kosher wine is a bubble. And, I don't want to say the real world, but they're kind of like is the real world outside of that bubble. Yeah, it's great being in the, just the general wine world. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't know Pennsylvania is the 4th largest wine producer in the United States. I think we overtook, it's California, Oregon, Washington are the big ones. I think that we're up at 4th now, because a lot of it actually goes to juice production. So Lake Erie is actually where most of the vineyards are. So that's in the western part of the state, north of Pittsburgh. I'm in the eastern part of the state, kind of central between basically Philadelphia and Wilkes-Barre, if you're familiar with that area. So there's 2 kind of major wine regions. And, surprisingly, the Lehigh Valley where I am there's probably about 30, 40, maybe pushing 50 wineries here just in this area. I mean, there's like something like 300 to 400 wineries in the state. So it's actually a major wine producing region. It's cool climate. It's kind of like northern France, Germany, Austria, Hungary. So kind of the northern cooler climate belt of Europe. Yeah, so Pinnacle Ridge was one of those wineries kind of here on the wine trail, very known for their sparkling wines, which I know you're a fan of.
Right. That was my next question. Is that's kind of where you learn your technique with the sparkling wine? And yes, I'll get into that later. I adore your recent
loves everything sparkling.
I do, but I went on record as saying that I think it was that 21 that Kevin just put out, that Binah put out, is really fantastic. And I think and don't take it the wrong way, but I think it's the second best possible value in sparkling wine available in the kosher world, which you shouldn't take it the wrong way. It's amazing. It's just hard to beat that Gilgal that's like $18. It's really great. But yours is amazing. I think it competes with any French champagne I've had, any of the big names, which cost more and are not any better.
Yeah.
It's really great wine. And I think it's a big accomplishment that you achieved that in such a short time.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I credit that to, my time at Pinnacle Ridge. So Brad Knapp, who was the winemaker there, he became kind of one of Pennsylvania's masters of sparkling wine. He really had the system down. In fact, I was just talking to someone today, and a lot other people try to do it. They don't know how. I mean, you can read a textbook about how to do it, but unless you kind of mentor under somebody who's done it, you don't learn those tricks of the trade. There's a few things that you have to get just right. And if you don't, you just end up with like a gushy mess. And
could you give us
it gets real. You can go south very easily, but if you get it right, it's you just have to know it. You have to learn from somebody that does it, and it's the same thing in France and Champagne. They've been doing this for centuries.
Can you give us the 5-minute Coles Notes version of like how do you? I don't even know the process of making sparkling wine.
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts like any white wine. So we make a still wine. Typically, you pick the grapes early, so they're underripe in terms of bricks or the sugar content. So they produce a lower alcohol initially, but picking them early retains the acidity, which is really important because we're well over 1% acidity, whereas most still wines are like 0.5%. So this is like twice as much acid. So it's really tart on the palate. And then it being a lower alcohol content up front, it allows you this leeway because you're going to add alcohol later. So basically we make a still wine, a white wine like we do we ferment it, we finish it, it's sitting in tank. What makes it a sparkling wine is then you take it, you mix just the right amount of yeast and the right amount of sugar back into it, and that yeast will ferment that sugar. And because you've stuck it in a bottle and you put a crown cap, which a beer cap on top, it's now an enclosed system. So as they ferment that sugar, when yeast ferment sugar, they produce alcohol, they produce carbon dioxide, and they produce heat. Carbon dioxide's all trapped in the bottle. The little bit of alcohol they produce now. So if our base wine for sparkling was say 10.5, 11% alcohol, you'll get an additional 1%. It'll take you up to the 12%. You additionally get all that carbon dioxide, which is now trapped in the bottle, and you go to 6 atmospheres of pressure, which is like 90 psi. It's a lot of pressure in a real traditional method champenois sparkling wine, which gives you all those wonderful bubbles in the mouth and all that. It's not like a forced carbonated wine, like some other wineries do, or a pet nat, where they stuff it in the bottle, kind of fermenting, getting cloudy and all that, which is how wines used to be before they mastered the method in Champagne, 3 centuries ago. But now we do it a clearer wine. So the question is, everybody always asks, well, if you have all this yeast in the bottle, how do you make it clear? So then we do the process of riddling, which if you see right behind me here, this is a riddling rack. I guess I'll take a bottle. So these have in here, the yeast is in the neck of the bottle here. It's all in there. You put it in this rack, and you'll do the process of riddling, and you'll go and you'll turn each bottle a little bit each day. And what you're doing is you're concentrating all the yeast in the neck, and that allows you to turn the bottle upside down, and you can freeze the neck. And so all that yeast is in an ice plug. And then that allows you to turn it over without all the yeast mixing back in. And when you crack the beer cap off, basically the pressure in the bottle shoots that thing out like a bullet. And that's how you get a clear wine, and then we put the dosage in, which is like a simple syrup, a sugar mixture to balance out the natural acidity in the wine. And then you stick the cork in. So that's basically the process. But like I said, there's a few tricky points if you don't get them just right.
So you ferment it like a beer.
A great sparkling wine, and it's not.
Right. So
are you planning on? Go ahead.
No, how do the bubbles get there? Sorry to ask this very simple question.
Bubbles?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when yeast ferment, they consume the sugar that you put in the bottle. That's the same as any wine that you make. So any wine that we make, there's yeast in there. They consume the sugars in the grapes, and not only producing alcohol, they also produce carbon dioxide. When
same as the pickles I make.
Carbon dioxide blows off because it's an open system. But when you make a sparkling wine, you're trapping it in the bottle. You're trapping all that in there. So that's where the bubbles come from. It's naturally occurring from the fermentation of the wine.
Amazing.
Yeah, like I was saying, it's if you ever open, sometimes you buy like real pickles, the ones that they don't even seal. You open it and it'll be fizzing at the top. It's the same exact process.
Same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, so most red wines go through malolactic fermentation, and some whites, like barrel-aged Chardonnay, Burgundy. There's that second fermentation that they do on those that converts malic acid, which is the primary acid in apples, which is very sharp on the palate, into lactic acid, which is the same acid that's in like dairy products. So it's much softer acid. So that's kind of where you get that creaminess and butteriness in a lot of barrel-aged wines from. But that's kind of a similar fermentation that actually, like sauerkraut and pickles go through. So it's a bacteria there that converts that acid. It's not a yeast.
Are we expecting bubbly from you on an annual basis now?
Yeah, I would think so.
My man.
There's a 2020, and basically I've been doubling production.
Good.
First we kind of, made some, well, let's see how this goes, but it's become very popular. So there's twice as much in 21, and then the 22 batch is even twice that. So yeah.
Put me down.
Yeah.
How about, do you plan on messing around with like a non-dosage or any of that kind of thing? Or are you just going to stick to?
No, I think we'll stick to the recipe. It works.
Well, you should. And how about the pet nod? Do you plan on doing that at all? that kind of thing is like not your jam, like that.
Why would I do that when I can do the real thing?
Right. Let me ask you this: Why do those pet nats sell for like $40?
I don't know.
Good. All right.
People are willing to pay for it.
That what? Sorry.
People are willing to pay it.
I guess so. I guess it's the first rule of business. Someone's willing to pay.
One, right? If you can find someone to pay for it.
So that brings me to like. By the way, there was no. I talked to Yisroel between this episode and last. I talked to a bunch of people, and they're like, "We prefer the non-preparatory style of your podcast." So this was very non-prepared. But it brings me to a point with you. I think one of the things people love about Binah is that your wines are affordable. Your wines, and especially if you like your club, which I want to mention, you could go to Binah website. I think it's binahwine.com. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, no.
Binah.
BinahWinery.com. BinahWinery.com might get you there too. But yeah, just Google Binah Winery with BINAH.
And we'll have it in the show notes. But if you're part of that, I think it's a 20% off club.
Yeah. In fact, that's why I'm glad it's happy hour. I'm exhausted because I sent out my club shipments today. So yeah, you get 20% off in the club release, and then 10% off non-release orders and complimentary shipping on 4 bottles, whereas usually you have to get a whole case. So I think it's the best wine cooler around.
It's I keep teasing this, but we are going to do an episode on wine clubs, and that's one that I'm such a fan of because it's so affordable, and you are so approachable and reachable.
For now.
Well, for now, but that's get in now when like you're obviously very reachable and a pleasure to work with. I'm drinking the Merlot, the 2022 Merlot. This is my first taste of it. Drinking it live, and I love it. Very cool climate, and it's not what a lot of people are used to with the jammy California style Merlots, which I like also. This is more Bordeaux than a typical American Merlot,
Hmm.
right? It's a little lighter bodied. There's more acid in it,
Yeah, more floral.
more floral. It's really good. I think it's and not that expensive. I don't remember what it was, but not that expensive. I this is a wine I but let me ask you something about this because I see it's a 22. Is there oak in there? Is it oaked at all or it's not?
Yeah, that was in a barrel for a year.
Okay. So you think it has probably decent aging potential too,
I would think so. I mean, Merlot, not as much as the Cabernets, but
right?
I don't know, easily 5 to 10 years, I would think.
Really good. Well, I have to get more because it's my only bottle.
Right.
But I figured I had to open something I hadn't tasted with you, and this is the only one left I haven't tasted yet. I tasted the Pinot a couple weeks ago. I love that also. And I'll be honest, I think you've really gotten better with the reds. These reds are great.
Yeah,
I was
like I say, credit the grower. Don't give me too much credit because that Merlot came from a really premium vineyard down in Chester County, just south of Coatesville. Um, it's an older vineyard. It's taken it's managed very well. Brian Dickerson is the grower. Um, it makes a lot, especially here in Pennsylvania in the cool climate. It makes a huge difference. The grower, we have a lot of novice growers in the state, um, and you'll notice it. It very much depends on the vineyard location, the slope. Is it facing south? How much sun does it get? Canopy management, how many leaves are there? Do the clusters, are they exposed to the sun at what times of day? It's very dependent on these microclimates that you get here.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at walking into a vineyard and knowing what to look for? Like, is that something you get better at, or you kind of already knew that?
Well, it's a matter like so. I'm going to be honest. The first year I started, you're the new guy on the block. You're right.
Right.
You got to develop these relationships, and the demand for those very high quality grapes, especially in our area, you got to have a reputation. So it took me a couple of years to get in there, for people to notice, hey, he's getting some awards, he's shipping around the country, stuff like that. But once you get in there and people realize, hey, because they put a lot of work into growing these grapes, they don't want to just give them to anybody. So you gotta pass the entrance interview first.
Is it harder
But
to is it harder to grow grapes in Pennsylvania compared to California? I mean, I know yes, but could you just kind of I'm fascinated by this. Could you talk about the differences? Because we all know
oh
California.
yeah, well, I grew that in 2019. I grew the grapes myself. Since then, I've been buying the grapes from growers for various reasons. But I had firsthand experience growing. It's extremely challenging to grow grapes in Pennsylvania. I mean, just like it is in Europe and France, Bordeaux, they really struggle with this in some vintages. It's very humid. It rains. We deal with very high disease pressure from mildews, fungus, and things like that. Get thunderstorms that come through, and you get a few inches of rain, and it'll explode overnight. So you really have to keep up on that. We have to spray more than they do in California. It's cooler. Sometimes you get these late frost in May, and they'll totally wipe out the crop. If you can get past that, and you can get past June, and it doesn't rain too much, you get a good crop set. but you could have a great vintage all the way through August, September, and then the hurricanes will come through, and it won't let up raining. And then it's like, you pick now, you wait, you risk losing the crop. It's extremely challenging. There's some years where it's so cold and rainy. I remember, 2018, August was like 65 degrees. It did not warm up. It rained for weeks on end, and nobody was able to make red wine that year. They just pressed off all the reds and made rosé. We'll get a like that once every 10 years easily. And then there's some times where you get that really amazing year, and then the reds are really bold and could match the wines from California. So there's just a lot of fluctuation. Whereas in California, I think in general, it's more consistent. It's drier. They don't have that kind of disease pressure. I mean, there's parts of California where it's so dry, they can just organic farm. They don't even have to, they don't have spray or anything like that.
What would you say are the better vintages for Pennsylvania to look out for, like at least from you or for in general?
2020 was a cooler year. 22 was very good. I think it was up there. I wouldn't say it's a perfect vintage, but 22 was very good in general. 21 was pretty good. 20 is on the cooler side. But here's the thing. So you can get it, like, they have the same thing in France. When you get a really bad vintage, surprisingly, those wines have very good aging potential. Because they're underripe. There's a lot of acid in them. So they taste terrible up front. They're very vegetable. But if you put them away for 20 or 30 years, they come around. And so it's kind of this goofy situation, Whereas it's different. Warm climate, those wines are meant to drink up front, right? Right. And then, but maybe 10 years out, it's they just become a flabby mess,
I'm fascinated that Pennsylvania and Bordeaux, I understand what you're saying. I just never thought about it. You kind of just blew my mind thinking about, Bordeaux.
In fact,
is such. Sorry, say that again?
Even in fact, closer. So if you go in southern Pennsylvania and even in northern Maryland, even down by Kenny's Way in Baltimore, that's much more like Bordeaux down there. So the Bordeaux reds, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Merlot do very well down there. You get these gentle rolling hills. It looks very much like Bordeaux.
Wow. To think about that America has a region like that and you can compare it. And I'm hearing you talk about, the appellation and talking about, a lot of the similar issues with the climate. And so that we do have that to be able to base on is fascinating.
Yeah. So Cabernet Sauvignon, they grow it here. Some people try a varietal Cabernet Sauvignon, but in general, it's a blending grape, just like it is in Bordeaux.
Exactly.
It's produced like a Napa Cab, but when you blend it in, it gives structure to the Merlot and things like that, and you can really get that Bordeaux-like character. It's very.
Is there a varietal, and I'm using the word varietal for those who don't know what that is, single grape? Is there a varietal, a wine that you would say it does so well in Pennsylvania?
Merlot's pretty good. Cabernet Franc has gotten a good standing. For a while they were saying that was kind of going to be the red grape of Pennsylvania. In terms of white grapes, Gruner Veltliner is ascending the ranks in terms of a white. Chardonnay grows very well. It's very versatile. It makes sparkling, still barrel aged. Down in southern Pennsylvania, people are doing well with Albarino.
What about some of the cold climate grapes that you've used over the last bunch of years?
So hybrid. So that's a whole other. We haven't even talked about that. Because in California, they really don't do that kind of a thing. So what we have here, they call them French American hybrids, and basically what they do is they cross Vitis vinifera, which are the European varieties, with American grapes. And so basically you get the characteristics of the European wines, but they have the disease resistance and the cold hardiness to be able to grow well here. And actually grow them, for example, Chambourcin. That was originally developed in the Loire Valley of France. and they grew it there for a long time. They don't let them use it in the table in the the what do they call it, the AOC over there. So the high end wines they don't, but like the jug wines, the grocery store wines that people, the table wines that people drink over there, they'll be made from hybrids. Yeah, so some of those do very well. Chamberson is, very high quality red. And then there's some other whites like Traminette, which is a child of Gewürztraminer. So it has those very floral, lychee characteristics. Vidal Blanc is another one. That's Uni Blanc, which they make cognac out of. What's the other one? Cayuga White. That has very peach characteristics, which was in my Celeste blend. It makes wine's kind of like a Germanic Riesling style. Yeah.
Yeah, what was the grape? That original Stella, it was
2019 was Saval Blanc.
I'm testing you because I'm looking at the answer.
Yeah, well, the blend has changed every year.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, that's more of a field blend type of wine.
Yeah, so the blend changes. So the first year it had to do with what was growing in that vineyard. It was Saval Blanc, Chardonnay, and Vignol.
Correct. You passed the test.
Vignol gets like super ripe and tropical, so it had like these pineapple characteristics that first year. The next year I had to go to a different vineyard. I actually went down to Maryland, to Baltimore County, to get the Saval Blanc down there. Saval Blanc is it ripens early. It's got kind of like these melon characteristics and like this grassiness. It's got like characteristics of Sauvignon Blanc, and it's kind of like Chardonnay. Very versatile. Chardonnay has all the characteristics of Chardonnay. But that's it. I mean, Stella is meant to be a dry white wine for people who like dry white wine, for the Chardonnay drinkers out there. And it's been extremely popular. I'm very happy with it. Those hybrids make really good wine, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's interesting that you see these French hybrids more, I feel like I may be totally wrong on this, but I feel like you see it more in places like Pennsylvania and cool climate American cities than you do in France.
Yeah. Well, they're there in France. Like I said, they're
right.
They're poor quality table wines. They don't, the French are so,
right.
The wine is their wine. They don't,
Right. Right.
But America does very well. In fact, even out in the Midwest, Ohio, Michigan, Missouri, Chamberson grows out there. It's just a lot easier for the growers. Whereas the Vitis vinifera, it struggles a lot more in these climates. It's not as a consistent crop, so people will grow them and they'll blend them into things. Chamberson is a Teinturier grape. It's one of those like Alicante Boucher. Well, I think you talked to Jonathan about
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Of course.
That's correct. Right. It's one of those.
He talked about that, how you get the red juice from some of these red grapes, whereas usually a red grape, you can press it off and make white wine from it. So like Champagne has Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier in it, which are both red grapes, but you can make a red juice from them, or white juice, I mean.
Right. Unlike the Chamberson, you mean, and the Alicante Boucher.
Yeah. So Chamberson's very good for blending. And again, with the cool climate, sometimes you get a very cool vintage and there's not a lot of color in the red wines, like very, very pale. And so you can use something like a Chamberson to add some color to the wine.
There's a question I've had for a long time that I've never asked and I've never heard an answer on it, is that I feel that the whole color thing is an old thing. I feel like people bought wine 100, 200, 500 years ago. They wanted that color because that looked like, that it was taken seriously and they used good grapes and they weren't diluting it and things like that. Why does color matter so much anymore? And, I'm drinking this Merlot right now. It's pretty pale for a Merlot because it's cool climate. Mm-hmm. That doesn't bother me. In fact, I look at that almost as an attribute that I know it's a cooler climate and I'm going to get the types of things that I'm looking for in this glass. So why does that matter so much that you need the color in some of these wines? Is it that pale?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a cool climate thing. Surprisingly, color is not a direct correlation with, like, there's some very pale looking wines that have a heck of a lot of body, surprisingly.
Grenache.
Yeah,
Mm.
there's not a
Yes.
direct in between these things. There's not a direct correlation between the sugar content of the grape either in some of these things. It's more of a complex, beast going on here.
But do you understand the question I'm asking? I'm saying like why do winemakers like feel the need to add color sometimes? Is there something else going on besides the actual color or
It's it's a perception thing, I think. Out in
right?
the, a lot of winemakers don't filter their wines either for that reason. Oh, look at all the depth of color in this wine. Well, shine a flashlight through that wine, it looks so deep in color because there's a lot of stuff floating around in that wine.
Right.
Mhm.
So, it's a controversial topic, filtering, but I'm a big proponent of it. I think it
Of controversy?
contra-
I said you're a big proponent of controversy?
Oh, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah. I like that you tell the truth. That's why I was excited to have you on. I like that you tell the truth, and I like that you operate a little bit outside the box, and that's why, I'm
I don't feel the need to hide things. A lot of wineries. I don't want to talk about that, but put it out there and just be honest. I think can't hurt.
It, you really have changed my perspective on winemaking in so many ways. I have a funny question for you.
Mhm.
If a young potential winemaker is listening to us right now and kind of getting inspired by
Yeah,
you from just the fact that you just did it. You haven't been doing this for very long. You got into it and you started off, you know, you're growing your own grapes. Now you're doing it differently. You're very creative in your winemaking. Is there another region in the US that you think somebody should set up shop and try to play with the grapes there?
I mean, I think they should do it here. I don't think we have enough wineries here on the East Coast. I
you
mean,
know, I,
it's very saturated. There's a lot of competition out there. I'd like to see more in the kosher wine world out of Oregon.
yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Washington State. Um, the southeastern. It would be very interesting if somebody went down to like the Carolinas or Georgia and what is it, the muscadine grapes? The thick skin ones with the pits inside. You can make wines out of those. That'd be really interesting. The Midwest, Ohio, Illinois, Missouri.
Right. I think people don't realize because we're in, as you called it, the kosher bubble. Like I drive all around Maryland. There's wineries everywhere, and there's great wineries in Maryland, especially out like west in that type of area. Because as you get closer to the mountain ranges, it can be done here easily. I mean, it's just people think California, 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 and I get it because if you are an Orthodox winemaker, you want to be near an Orthodox community. You don't want to live out in the middle of nowhere by yourself. But you
Yeah,
don't live out by yourself. There's a community where you are. Anyway, but
small community.
there's like it could be done outside Baltimore. It can be done outside Baltimore, and it could be done in Texas. Texas is a place majorly on the rise. In Virginia and places like that, Missouri. These places are really like growing winemaking regions, and they could be done there. And like it's something that we need so badly. So I think I wouldn't say I'm dependent on you, but we need you, man. Like we need someone to make something a little different and something with a different profile in a different region. So I think what you're doing is amazing, and I hope that more people. I hope you encourage and inspire other people.
Yeah. I want to see you starting a trend. I think there's something really amazing here. And again, we don't look at this. And you looked at it and you did it and you're doing it well. And I want to see other people take a look at you and say, this is possible.
Yeah, for sure. Anything to expand that bubble, you know. I mean, for some time now, we've talked about we're in the golden age of kosher wine, but I don't even think we're there yet. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface here in America.
Right.
Not at all. I mean, just 5 years ago, thought. I mean, people talk about Pennsylvania wine, but you can make some very serious world-class wine here in Pennsylvania. I mean, you talk about Virginia, Maryland. I mean, and these wines rival European quality. So, don't don't have the blinders on. Anything's possible. There's wineries in all 50 states in America. It can be done. You just have to do it. You have to find what works. Advice to young winemakers or people getting started is just get in there, start making wine and make mistakes. I mean, I made all the mistakes up front. The first wines I made at home, I don't even know how we drank this. They're pretty bad, but you figure it out. I mean, I think in 2017 when I was working at Pinnacle Ridge, so part of the harvest, I didn't even take a paycheck for like a couple months. I was just getting paid in grapes. I would just come home and I'd bring the grapes home. So I'd work like a 12-hour, 14-hour shift at Pinnacle Ridge, making the wines, take the grapes home, and then I'd be up till 3 o'clock in the morning making my own wines. And then I'd be back at the winery at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I think that year I probably made at least 40 different wines between what I was doing at home and what I was doing at the winery. So that's the only way you learn. Just do it. Find somebody that knows how to do it, talk to them, ask questions. The wine world is very open. People know how hard it is. They're in general very supportive. They're very open. They're willing to.
I'm curious about this as well. In Europe, in Italy, in France, in Spain, there's a lot of people that are expanding the kosher world by going to non-kosher wineries and doing kosher runs. Why didn't you go to Pinnacle Ridge or go to these really great wineries near you and do a kosher run?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it when I was there. Brad, the owner, kept asking about it. Could we do something like that? Because he was always looking to try to expand that. I think in the end, logistically, it just didn't work out. It was going to be the hassle of separating it out and then the expense of paying for certification. These are small wineries. I don't know. It just didn't work out. Not to say that it couldn't work. People are doing it. Who did it? Ari Lockspicer, I think, at Lakewood. So with kosherwine.com was doing it for a while. Like Sheldrake Point, they do it.
Right.
It's much more prevalent in Europe. But there's some people doing it here. That's not to say it's not possible, but it's always logistically easier just to have an exclusively kosher winery.
Right.
So let me ask you, because we didn't talk about it at all. I don't remember exactly your own personal story, not even in winemaking, but how I believe that you at some point became religious, and right? How did you get led to kosher wine, I guess is the question.
Well, I guess it was my early 20s. I was starting to become more observant. I started keeping Shabbat. And you had to drink wine and make kiddush. And I don't know, I think I was buying like Herzog Rosé by the case at that point. And, then I started spending more money on wine and figured out I had a pretty good palate. And then somewhere along the way, I got interested in actually making it. It was always kind of sort of there in the back of my mind, and I guess in a way in my blood. And so on my dad's side, my great grandfathers, they were from Sicily, so they, like all the Italians, they would make their own wine. So I remember that being there, and I kind of asked them, do you remember how I used to make the wine and stuff like that? So I kind of got the basic bearings from there. And originally I was from Southern California, a native of the Cucamonga Valley, which is about 40 miles east of Los Angeles, and that was America's largest wine producing region at one time. There was 45,000 acres of vine out there. And so just growing up around that, I remember being a kid, and it was kind of a semi-rural area where we were, and the vineyards were still around, the wineries were still around, that smell was kind of in the air. So it was always kind of in my subconscious, and then just came to a head in my 20s when I started drinking wine, just found I had a good palate, and then just got interested in making wine. And then when my wife and I moved up to Allentown, so before that so this is my second career. I used to do architectural lighting design. So architectural engineering type of background. And down there, we were in a condo. I didn't have any space to make any wine. But when we moved up to Allentown and we decided, we were becoming more observant and found a small community to be in, I had some space that I could start making wine. And surprisingly found that even despite the small community here, there was a lot of people that were really into wine here. And as soon as I said, I'm going to start a kosher winery, they just all came out of the woodwork and they were like, how do we help? And I remember the first vintage we did, there was probably 20 people in my basement, hand distemming grapes. And yeah.
Amazing.
It's an interesting thing. My friend Joel Bernstein, some people in the wine world know him, and he actually has a hand in some Italian wines. He's always told me there's a direct connection to Sicily and Jewry, that a lot of the Muranos ended up there, and it's an interesting thing how Sicily is always it's a little bit different than the rest of Italy, but it's interesting. You said they always made their own wine there, and I really wonder if that's kind of the root of it.
Oh yeah, well, they say like up to 50% of the island has Jewish roots, because back in the 15th century when the Spanish Empire basically said you couldn't be Jewish anymore, a lot of these people converted if they didn't leave. They say up to 30% of Brazil has Jewish roots. There was like this whole Sephardic world that we lost.
Right.
And because when they were exiled 2,000 years ago by the Romans, they brought the Jews to Sicily. They found the ancient mikvahs there. So that wine, it was all, the whole Mediterranean was all very connected. In Israel, we have the modern wine industry that's now sprung up, but there was an ancient industry. I mean, wine goes back for a long time. That's why people say, are you worried about like the future of wine? Because what the wine world in general is kind of going through a very rocky period right now. There's an oversupply. It's going to be a buyer's market for wine for a while. There's an oversupply of wine. Demand is
about time.
I hear you. But I'm not worried. Wine's been around for a long time. It's what brings people together.
And like you say,
central thing in Judaism,
right? And it's interesting that you said like you needed Kiddush wine to some degree. And I always think of Benjamin Kantz. Yeah. Like he really started making wine for a religious reason. Like he wanted wine for Kiddush, and he says that even on his bottle, which is anyone that knows him knows. Go ahead.
For that reason,
right? And that's such a cool thing, I think, and that's something that's so unique about the kosher wine world and the Jewish wine world more than the kosher wine world. Because kosher wine, of course, there's nothing different about it, but we will always need wine.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I think the notable thing about what's happening in Israel right now, and the fact that there are vineyards in the north burning, and these are people that are trying to bring something of shalom into the world, something that brings people happiness and peace. And what we're fighting against is people that want to burn that down.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about my op-ed there.
No.
Tell us more about these 20 founding parents. Do they feel like they are the founding parents of Binah Winery? The people that were in your basement crushing the grapes with you?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, some of those people actually went on to help me in the vineyard that first year. A couple of those people were actually, the Mashiach that came in and helped with the bottling originally. Yeah, so, I mean, it's totally an Allentown brand. Some of those people have moved down to Philadelphia since then. We're very popular in Philadelphia. So, I mean, it really is Pennsylvania's kind of wine brand. Yeah.
It's amazing. I just was wondering if they feel like I just was kind of envisioning I would totally have said yes, and I'm there and been with you every step of the way. And I just wonder like if they feel like this is our brand, this is us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the brand in general, I like to say, a lot of, I'm not going to call it anyone specifically because I can't think of anyone specifically, but we all know there's certain wine brands where there's not necessarily in the kosher world, we'll pick some theoretical brand out there, but there's a lot of ego behind it. are very personality, but from the beginning, I make wine for the people. It's about the community. It's not about one person here. It's about all of us. Without the customers, there would be no Binah Winery. So, without those people who were down in that basement helping me out, there would be no Binah Winery. So, yeah, I think everybody who's been a part of this along the way for sure feels like this is in a way their brand.
Really special. I love that origin story. To me is so impactful that it wasn't just, yes, you can take that bold move and do it, but it was a community. It was the Allentown Jewish community that kind of created Binah Winery, which is, to me, I think that's what I would love to see more of, like that kind of collaborative feel and the idea of wine. Because if you're gonna you drink it together, like we have that bracha about Tova Meitiv, right? We can only make that bracha if we drink wine with somebody else. There's other things we have to also, you have to have another wine before that's not as good, but the bracha itself has to be about sharing. And for us, we know wine is about sharing. And then to hear that your process of winemaking and the origin story is about sharing, to me is really really powerful.
It is, and I appreciate very much that. I know, especially when I'm buying those bubblies, that Kevin/Chaim is doing every step of everything. His hand is on every piece of it. Do you still do the hand corking thing? Because I used to see the little. See, you're too big time now.
Yeah,
big time now.
I ran about 35,000 bottles through that hand corker in a few years, and basically the thing just blew up.
All right. I remember in those original pictures, wasn't your dad like helping you in the winery?
He helped me prune that vineyard. So he came back. He still lives in California, but he came and helped me prune the vineyard because I only had like a month. By the time the vineyard thawed out, because it was covered in snow and it was on this very steep slope, just like they have in Germany. So by the time it thawed out, and Pesach was right in the middle of that, and you have to get it pruned by the time bud break comes along. Otherwise, you're just going to have shoots coming out all over the place. The vines get totally out of control very quick. So it was like a mad dash. It was like anybody I could find, come, please help me in this vineyard. That's a wine. It brings people together. It's so labor intensive, and it's a community thing. It can't be done by one person. Everybody has to throw in their hands and get dirty.
I love it. I kind of am jealous of not being able to like Rabbi Yisroel was saying. Like I wish I lived closer to you, that I could get my hands dirty a little bit in your winery, and I still have to come visit.
Mm-hmm.
Henny, let's go for harvest.
This is we talk every single time. Every time we talk to people, we got to come visit. But okay, that's a 5-hour flight. This is a drive for me. This is a reasonable place for me to go, and I gotta go. 2 hours.
Yeah,
gotta do it. I gotta lock you down also.
Evan, you are incredibly inspiring. What is your message? What do you want people to know? For me, coming into this conversation, I have heard about you for months from Kenny, for years, and our listeners have heard about you over the past episodes, and now to get to know you and I could feel your genuine, your authenticity, kind of coming through the screen here. And so I love to hear, like, what is your message about Binah and about winemaking to our audience?
Drink wine, have an open mind. There's a whole world out there that Hashem has created. We picked the name Binah because it's like the Sphira. So Binah takes like kind of that spark and develops this whole story. And it's the same thing in winemaking. The grapes grow, they absorb the sun, they absorb whatever's going on in the world that year. You make the wine, you stick it in a bottle, you let it sit around for a while, and then eventually you get people together and you open that bottle and the story just comes out. I mean, wine is an amazing thing. It's not a beverage. It's not like any other food product. You know, we recognize that significance in Judaism. You know, there's a special bracha over wine. There's such a significance. We make kiddush and havdalah, and it's at every simcha. It really, wine just opens up a whole new world, you know. So drink wine. Don't have any preconceived notions about it. It has to be this, or I can only drink red wine, or this, I can't drink white wine. You know, white wines do very well in Pennsylvania. There's amazing white wines out there. Don't let anything be off limits. You know, it's all permitted. What Hashem has permitted to us, enjoy it.
Thank you. It's amazing.
Dude, I love it. I need more, by the way. Are you shipping today? I know you are shipping today.
UPS already come, but
I need more of this. But I've had it open now for an hour. I popped it right before we started, and I know you told me this, Merlot, that to sit on it for a little bit. It has really even dramatically changed in the hour it's been open. And I almost don't like the term QPR, but this is really a QPR. And I really recommend this. And I hope people, like going on your theme of opening your mind, I hope people try this, because this is a unique spin on Merlot that a lot of kosher Jews are probably not used to, because you're used to the big like Napa Merlots, which are great also. But this is something different. And I think people should really try this. And again, it's Binah Winery, BINAH Winery, one word, .com. You can mention Kenny and Yisroel Bernath for 20% off the club. It's that for everyone. But thanks so much. I know you're so busy today, and thanks for taking time to sit with us.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Just you're incredibly inspiring. Really,
Whenever
thank you.
We'll get you dirty.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. And if anyone wants to find it, the information is going to be right in the show notes. And like I said, I'm probably going to put Kevin's email address in there so you can bug him and make your orders. And he's very accessible for now, so get in while you can. But Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And really, like, serious haslacha. We need you, man. We need you.
We'll keep at it. We'll keep making wine.
Please. All right. Great being with you guys.